Hi, I am Maria, and welcome back to PubCo Insights CEO Chat. Today, we're really fortunate to have a man with a history of success with public companies in his field. Please meet CEO and founder of Sigyn Therapeutics, Mr. Jim Joyce. Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Maria. It's a pleasure to be on today.
So let's start with the name Sigyn. How did you come up with that, and what does it stand for? What does it mean?
Well, you'd have to first understand that we are what's called an extracorporeal blood purification company. We create therapies to address life-threatening conditions, and in most cases, life-threatening conditions that represent unmet needs in global health and aren't well addressed by drug therapies. And I bring this up because extracorporeal means outside of the body. And Sigyn is actually a Norse goddess, and her husband, Loki, was dying from toxins being dripped on him from a serpent. And she held up a chalice, and there's a famous painting of this to capture the toxins before it would kill her husband. And we'd like to thank or honor Sigyn, recognize her for perhaps the first documented extracorporeal outside of the body therapy.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's fascinating. So tell us a little bit about the backstory of Sigyn Therapeutics.
The company was born out of frustration. And when I say frustration, it's the frustration in the lack of advances to treat sepsis, which is in many cases, most cases, induced by a viral infection, a bacterial infection. Again, I reference unmet global needs in health. This is certainly representative of that. It's the number one cause of hospital deaths worldwide. And I'll go back and reference more than 10 years ago, I testified before Congress that there would be a need for therapies that could address a broad spectrum of pathogens, as well as inflammatory cytokines or the cytokine storm, as when people die from emerging pandemic threats, of bioterror threats, or just regular pathogen infections. The severe infections result from sepsis, which is induced by a viral infection, bacterial infection, and an overproduction of inflammatory cytokines. So, we've been actively involved in this field. There have been advances that came out of a DARPA dialysis-like therapeutic program that treats sepsis in wounded warfighters. I participated in that program for 5 years, and the program produced some interesting extracorporeal blood purification technologies that could address pathogen threats, and then separately those that address inflammatory cytokines. Sigyn therapy, we designed it to address both the pathogen threats in concert with the removal of inflammatory mediators, including inflammatory cytokines.
Wow. So what's the company's current state of development?
Well, this was something that was more conceptual, but based on our background in the field, we designed a device that we thought could be effective in reducing the circulating presence of pathogens and inflammatory mediators. We designed a device, locked in the design, created manufacturing protocols, then did preclinical testing through a collaboration with a team at the University of Michigan that demonstrated the broad spectrum ability to address viral pathogens, bacterial toxins, inflammatory cytokines, and other types of toxins as well. We then transitioned into initiating and completing a series of animal studies that demonstrated that technology could be administered safely and that was well tolerated. And we've taken this collection of data and we're incorporating it into what's called an investigational device exemption that we're drafting for submission to the FDA to initiate our first clinical studies here in the United States in humans.
So can you tell me a little bit about how it is actually administered?
Oh, sure. Very good question. And hopefully I can create a visualization of how this works. The device itself it looks very much like a dialysis cartridge. It's a cylinder. It's approximately a little over a foot long, about 3 inches in diameter. And incorporated within the device is a cocktail of adsorbent components that allows us to rapidly, on a rapid real-time basis, address the targets that we're trying to remove from the circulatory system. But we gain blood access, blood flows through the device actually quite rapidly at 300 mils a minute. So your average size person, their entire circulatory system would flow through the device about once every 15 minutes. And our target treatment times are on average targeted to be 4 hours. So, we're going to get the entire circulatory system of a patient turning over through the device. And each time the bloodstream moves through the device, we're reducing the circulating presence of pathogen threats in concert with the removal of inflammatory cytokines.
Wow. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And you've had experience with a Nasdaq publicly traded company previously. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm the founder of a company called Athlon Medical. And again, oversaw the development of a technology called the Athlon Hemopurifier from concept to clinical reality. This was a extracorporeal device, broad spectrum removal of viral pathogens, and it also had applications in cancer. Actually, the first therapy to receive 2 breakthrough device designations from FDA, which established a new precedent. It was a technology that Time magazine named a top 25 invention, one of the top 11 greatest advances in healthcare at the time. So yeah, this is something we're very, very proud of, but it provided us the genesis of kind of learning how to move into to create a device that has very expansive capabilities. But as a company, as a public company, the company, I grew it from a single shareholder startup to over 8,000 shareholders on Nasdaq during my tenure.
Yeah, it's been mentioned by your CFO to intend to get Sigyn Therapeutics to Nasdaq. Why do you think that that's possible?
Well, this is something I've done previously at Athlon. In our pathway at Athlon is similar to what our strategy is at Sigyn Therapeutics. We established ourselves as a public company initially through a merger with an established public company. And for us, we spent most of the first year and a half building our device, clinically testing it, moving it into animal studies, collecting data. But now that we're moving from that phase toward human studies under the banner of FDA, we now are focused on doing what's called an uplisting to Nasdaq. And that's our strategy here during the course of 2022. And parallel with initiating human studies, getting our regulatory submissions in place with FDA, we anticipate, or our objective is and has been to uplist our company on the Nasdaq, which provides much more visibility than where we currently trade.
So, as an investor, why would it be a good idea to invest in the company now instead of waiting until the company has its full FDA approvals?
Well, let me answer this question just in general, because I don't want to be a CEO that can be categorized as promoting himself. You should invest in us because you should invest in us if you're an investor and you believe that clinical progression through regulatory agencies is a value driver. And whether it's Sigyn Therapy or another company, historically, investors make their greatest profits when they can find companies where the management team can execute clinically, advance the company through clinical studies towards FDA approval. And that generally is a tremendous, that generally is if a company can execute, that generally results in value accretion for investors. But oftentimes investors think that the company's achievement of FDA approval is the point in time when value is created. And historically, if you look at therapeutic companies, you'd recognize that no, actually, in many cases, there could be a short-term blip, in value creation. But for companies that have a limited number of products, they then start getting valued based on their ability to market the product, which is a whole different metric for valuations, of which many companies aren't successful after they get FDA approval. So I just reference, if you believe in the management team, you think they have an executable strategy, they can advance it clinically from one stage to the next. In our case, our regulatory challenges are significantly smaller than that of drugs because we go through an agency called CDRH, which is the Medical Device Division.
So how is the current financial climate affecting Sigyn and its future?
Well, I think the current financial climate is going to affect a lot of companies, and I'll just step back and reference being a medical device that goes through CDRH. We're now it appears we're now transitioning from a time where access to capital resources was not difficult, but now companies will start being judged on how well they manage the capital that they have. In often cases, like with drug therapies that are moving through clinical studies, these therapies require significant amounts of capital to move through the regulatory trials process. And so companies like that oftentimes have to go back to the markets. But in most cases, they rely on partnerships to get their product across the goal with larger pharmaceutical companies. In our case, our regulatory hurdles are not of the same significance. We don't need to rely on partnerships, and our capital requirements will generally be a fraction of that are required by drug therapies.
So thank you so much, Jim, for clarifying, for being with us today. This is Maria from PubCo Insights. You can find this interview on social media and more at pubcoinsight.com. For more on Sigyn Therapeutics, go to sigyntherapeutics.com. Do you want to finish or close with anything, Jim?
No, Maria, thank you for having me on today. I will reference when you go to sigyntherapeutics.com. You'll find a lot of information on our technology, our backgrounds, but I will reference Sigyn is spelled SIGYN, SIGYN therapeutics.com.
Thank you so much, Jim. Have a lovely day. And thank you.
You too, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.